Hi friends, it is just 9 o'clock now. I'm going to hold off a few minutes before I get into today's topic, which is Jailhouse Informants. We won't be on with Chris tonight. He has a family priority that he needs to deal with, so that's understandable, as we know that happens with all of us. And but we'll welcome him possibly next week, because he does have a lot of first-hand knowledge and information about my brother Sean's case. So we'll have him add his expertise and input possibly on our next episode next Wednesday night. Just wanted to let you all know that I visited with Sean this past week, and it was a really nice visit, and we got to have some one-on-one time and go over just catching up and discussing his case and the details of his case. And I updated him on everything that I've been involved with, and with the podcast, and connecting through social media and through our website, which is withoutconviction.org. But Sean is doing very well, and he is very appreciative of the love and support that he's getting from you all, and this new community here through Without Conviction, and through Facebook and all that. So thank you for your continued support. You're lightening the load for him, so to speak, while he is serving time here in New York. And just a thank you. I had a birthday since the last time I was on here, so that was pretty uneventful. Another year, but I'm glad to still be here, and I know that was also Chris Hines' anniversary of being a free man. He was incarcerated for 30 plus years, and he was finally freed and back in society for 3 years, and he's doing well and thriving, and he has a very supportive family and loved ones surrounding him. So he's doing really well, and I'm just happy that he was able to celebrate his freedom. And let's see, a pretty big one that I'm hoping that you all check out after we log off here is episode 6 of Pros and Cons. That was just put out this past week as well. So that's one that's for the diehard justice seekers here, and that's the Travis Ray Bond story. He was convicted of rape and murder. It's a whole messy story, and there's still untested DNA in his case. So, if you want to learn more about his story and support him in his fight for freedom and for justice, just check out episode 6 of Pros and Cons. I will be sure to add a link to that once we're done with this live. And I also want to reach out to the public, because I've been getting messages from loved ones of some men who were either wrongfully convicted or harmed in some way by officials in Cayuga County or Auburn Prison in New York. And that is that's the prison and the county where Sean was wrongfully convicted, as well as many others who have similar circumstances in their cases by the same officials. So if anyone out there who's watching has any info on crimes committed by the DA or other officials, prison officials, local officials, judges in Cayuga County, New York, please contact me with your story and the information, because this is what we're trying to expose without conviction. And I thank those of you who have reached out to me and have trusted me with the stories of your loved ones. Thank you. So I want to start with the Jailhouse Informants in my brother's case. Jailhouse Informants are typically used when there's really no solid case against someone, and they're pretty much at the disposal of prison officials and or a DA to gain an indictment, to use their false testimony to get a conviction against a targeted individual. In my brother's case, I'm going to start with Robert David, who was actually used as their star witness. Now, on the day of the incident, according to the police report that was made right after, so the incident is the arson murder. Willis Jackson was killed in Auburn Prison, and they targeted my brother Sean, and they charged him, they indicted him, and ultimately convicted him. Wrongfully so, just using only Jailhouse Informants. But this one in particular, so he, on the day of the incident, according to the police reports, could not ID photo of Ryan. Okay, and this is how the story begins. Then the following day, he said the person was not white, but light complexion, black or Puerto Rican. Then later on, when he was interviewed again, he said he saw William Vasquez eye to eye. William Vasquez was an innocent person who was serving time at the same time as my brother, and they tried to rope him in because his false charge and false conviction was arson murder. So it fit the narrative for this case against my brother. However, upon looking further into it, the officials must have seen that William Vasquez was fighting for his innocence and trying to get that conviction overturned. So they went ahead, they didn't indict Mr. Vasquez or the other individual who was named as a suspect and co-conspirator in the case. So they failed to indict those two others, and they failed to discipline them or anything. Nothing happened to those two other individuals. They solely honed in on my brother and just built the case just to take him down alone. Now, their star witness, Robert David, gave 5 different versions of the incident. If you hear popping in the background, that's some fireworks going off. I guess people are celebrating a little late. So this same person who couldn't ID him initially, then the description that he gave was the complete opposite of my brother. My brother is he is a white Irish descent, and the crime occurred in the middle of winter. So, I don't think that he would fit the description of black or Puerto Rican. So, you know, that's obviously, that should have excluded him to begin with. So they chose instead to indict him, even though they let the other two people slide. And he also had a record as a psychiatric patient, which that information was withheld from the jury. So I think, you know, as far as, you know, credibility and consistency, because his every story that he gave, every version of it was at the very least contradictory to the first. So he kept contradicting, he kept changing his story, and that was their star witness. There's another one, William Underwood, who is a career informant. So that's what he did while he was in jail. He was like their basic, paid informant. If they needed to build a case on somebody, they knew they could call on him, because he would probably sell his own mother for 2 cigarettes. And you know, that's what he was doing in this case. He just gave whatever they asked him to do. That's what he did. But the interesting thing about him is he also named the same William Vasquez, who is that innocent person who was serving time in prison on a wrongful conviction, and he was later exonerated, thankfully. But he also named William Vasquez and Anibal Caballero as co-conspirators without the indictment. So that's another one. Then we have Mark Cooney. Mark Cooney was instructed by a guard at the prison he pointed my brother out, and this is all documented. Everything that I'm telling you is all documented. This guard pointed Sean out to this witness in the case and told him that he needs to go get information from him or about him. And that's a crime to do that, knowing that is a witness in this case. But what they did was they put this guy, Mark Cooney, in the same recreation yard as Sean for a couple of weeks so that he could get that intel there. Obviously it was all false, but that's what they did, to try to pin this murder on Sean. We have now Mark Lebo. Initially he gave no statement. He gave no ID or anything until months later. So on the day of the incident, he was not interviewed. He was shown pictures of Sean, and they said to him, if you want to go home, you have to say that this is the guy who did it. He showed him the picture, and that was the initial interaction, but he didn't give a statement or anything until months later. But months later, this was all after the coercion from the DA. He had been threatened by prison officials. He even was beaten while in prison when he got transferred, and this is all documented through correspondence between Mr. Lebo and the DA Paul Carbonaro, complaining that when the prison officials beat him upon arrival to his transfer, they wanted to make sure he got his story straight for the testimony. So, why would somebody be beaten? This is it's unacceptable. It's really despicable what they did to this guy. And he was a very easy target. I've talked about these guys before, but they were very easy targets. Mark Lebo in particular had a long history of substance abuse issues, alcohol, and other substances. but he was very easy to manipulate and control. So it was, they really played on that. They beat him. They made promises. They would only deliver the promises if he cooperated. And thankfully, Mark kept a record, unintentionally kept a record of all of this by corresponding with the DA Carbonaro. So that's really quite interesting. But ultimately, he received early parole, or recommendations for early parole. Unfortunately, those parole files were sealed by the corrupt judge involved, and that's Judge Corning. For any more information on the two individuals outside of the prison that were involved, it's DA Paul Carbonaro and Judge Peter Corning, and the two of them worked in tandem on several cases, overturned convictions, and they all involved misconduct, official misconduct, and each and every overturned case had false testimony. So where are they getting the false testimony? From these paid jailhouse informants. I want to go back to Robert David. Robert David was their star witness, and what happened with him is he got an early release. He got released 10 days after giving testimony, false testimony against Sean. The testimony was so horrible, where he couldn't keep his story straight. The judge actually jumped in, intervened, and assisted in the testimony somehow. And it's all documented. It's all in the trial transcripts. And if anybody is interested in reading those, I'll be more than happy to share them with you. But the judge in this case was just all orchestrated. So in order to keep the narrative going and to keep the script going, he would interrupt when Robert David would get off course with his story, and he would jump in to help fill in the blanks. And that's just, anyway, all the cases had official misconduct and false testimony by jailhouse informants. The final one that I want to talk about in Sean's case is Albert Bell. Now, Albert Bell, we know, later recanted his original testimony, and this was 12 years later, so he had like some sort of like a moral awakening or something, like his conscience got the best of him, and he came forward with that recantation and an affidavit to support and identify the crimes that were committed by the prison officials and the DA, where he spilled the beans on the whole thing. So the DA had a meeting with these jailhouse informants, and he instructed them to lie, to give perjured testimony. And now that in and of itself is a felony. It's the subornation of perjury. And I don't know what the statute of limitations is on that as far as any disciplinary action if proven, but this needs to be put out there. And I know that, like I said earlier, my brother's not the only case that they did this in. I've mentioned all the other cases that I knew of since last year. I found out of 4 other confirmed overturned convictions involving those 2 officials, and using jailhouse informants. The first was the Roy Brown case, and DNA in that case, exonerated him from the beginning. He was an innocent man from day one, and they went ahead and built a case, including testimony from a jailhouse informant. So it's like, you know, where did this come from? In all these cases, they found somebody who just happened to hear an innocent man. In all of these cases, an innocent man, I'll share more of the cases in just a moment, but in Roy Brown in particular, he was innocent, but a jailhouse informant, claims that he confessed to him while in prison, even though DNA exonerated him years later, and they chose to go with that. You know, they used these men for their own advancement. They used these men to get grants, and in my brother's case in particular, there was a huge grant that was given to the county for the DA's office so that they could prosecute crimes committed in the prison. And, you know, it was like, I guess that was, he was like a kid in a candy store, this DA. He just went wild on these easy convictions, getting, you know, people who had a criminal history, a criminal past in many cases. And he made it just like a game where he would get the credit for the conviction, you know. But, you know, that was Roy Brown I told you about. And another one is the Thomas Bianco case. And this one, I haven't really gotten into too much of the details because I'm piecing together something much bigger. And it's going to require a lot of input from residents and other witnesses from Auburn, New York. That's the Julie Monson murder case. And in that one, you know, jailhouse informants were used as well. So, but the Julie Monson case is, it's a lot more corrupt than all the others, in my opinion. It's, you know, the murder of a young girl, and the Judge Corning, his son was actually named as one of the suspects, but that testimony, you know, in the police reports and the affidavits, disappeared. It never made its way into court. That young man was never questioned or never indicted or anything, even though he was named as one of the last people to see her alive. But we're gonna work a lot more on that case. But I just want to mention that the Judge Corning, even though his blood relative, his son, had been named and that evidence was withheld from this case, he sat as judge on this case. You know, in real life right now, you know, how would that ever be tolerated? How was that tolerated? You know, his own son was named and he sat as judge in that murder trial, and they got the conviction, but the conviction was later overturned for Thomas Bianco. And you know, those are two pretty major cases. And again, I really want to give Julie Monson and her family the respect and dignity that they deserve. And I will be dedicating an episode to her story in the future. So before Corning sat as judge, he had 2 overturned convictions as well, wherein there was official misconduct and false testimony again, and it was Willie Jean and Sammy Thomas, the Thomas brothers. They had eyewitness testimony from the victim's brother, who described the assailant, or the assailants, as white, male, and the two brothers, Sammy and Willie Jean, were black men. And instead of going ahead with, the credible witness in this case, they took, you guessed it, jailhouse informant testimony to convict these two men, these two brothers. And this was in the late 70s, before Corning became judge. He was a DA, so he kind of set the tone for the improprieties of the the next DA, who was Paul Carbonaro. And they, like I said earlier, they worked together on these cover-ups, and these cover-ups go very deep and very wide, but I'm happy to share them with you because these stories need to be told. And although the judge in this case has passed away since, there are still the other officials who were involved. They're still out there. They're earning a living off of us. Their careers, whether they ended or not in government, in representing us, or going into the private sector, they've flourished. They've gone on to succeed and maintain a lifestyle, while men have lost their lives. Men have been just sitting in prison. My brother especially, he's been in there all these years, and he's been in solitary confinement for the past 27 years, which is beyond torture, and there's no way to right that wrong. I don't know what type of therapy can ever even help to make him whole again, but we're gonna do the best we can for that. But there are also two other men sitting in prison right now at the hands of those corrupt officials, and that's Shakim Allah and Damon Hill. And in those cases as well, it was jailhouse testimony that was used, paid jailhouse testimony. They paid these individuals to give false testimony against all these innocent men. They got what they got it. They got it easily, without any repercussion, without any anything. They just went on to live their lives and didn't bat an eye, knowing that these men were going to pretty much spend in what they could foresee is the rest of their lives in prison. And they just didn't care. They did not care. They stripped any possibility of freedom from them without caring. But that is where you and I come in and fight for their freedom, and fight for the justice that these men deserve. I'll be bringing more stories to you of the corruption, but again, anybody out there in Auburn, New York, or in Cayuga County who has any info. I know I heard of a case where the DA was arrested on weapons charges as well. And I'm looking into that and other crimes that may have been committed. So just continue to reach out to me. If I haven't responded to you yet, I certainly will. This is a long story, and it's a long time coming, but we're going to bring it together, and we're going to bring it to the forefront and fight for justice. Some of the victims involved, it's too late to get justice for them because they've passed away, whether they were, killed by someone in the prison or, another official or something, and the cover-ups that went on are atrocious. I'm sorry for those losses, but we still need to bring that to the public's attention. and you know, ask why was this ignored in the past by media, because there was media coverage on these cases. There was media coverage on especially in the Roy Brown case and the Thomas Bianco case. You know, they exonerated these men and celebrated the exonerations, but never once stopped to say, well, how did they get those convictions in the first place? How did they get the confession? There's a fly in here, I'm sorry. How did they get the confession from an innocent man? And there was no confession. It was just paid perjury. And that's something that we have to put a stop to in the future. We have to bring to light, you know, what's happened in the past, and you know, just keep moving forward and pushing forward for reform in this really unjust system. But I thank you so much for joining me again on this Wednesday. I want you to definitely check out this Pros and Cons episode 6. That's going to be on Early Talk Wake Up Sessions, their page, and I will definitely share a link on that. It's going to be on YouTube. So what we'll do is provide the link for any and all of those. And you know, when you see that, like and share the page. You know, leave your comments on the YouTube page there. That's produced and edited by This is Blake Caesar Inc. and the Early Talk Wake Up Sessions. And I'm happy to be a part of that as well, because we're just bringing these stories of injustice to you. But yeah, thanks again for joining me, and I will be back next Wednesday if I don't hop on sooner, but next Wednesday at 9 p.m. And we'll be bringing you the actual felonies that were committed by officials in these cases. So I look forward to that. And thanks again for joining me. Have a great evening.